I'm Becky Quick of CNBC and your host of The Forum. I'll be guiding you through exclusive conversations among some of the world's global leaders. Conversations previously held behind club doors, but today we invite you in. The Economic Club of New York serves as the premier forum for nonpartisan discussion dedicated to connecting the world's brightest minds with preeminent public and private sector leaders. A nonprofit 501c3, the club is a 115-year-old platform for the conversations that help shape the future of our world. The Economic Club of New York, brightest minds, critical conversations, catalyst for innovation.
I really wanted to talk to you more about geopolitical issues because you really emphasize that in your shareholder letter, and wanted your views on what you felt were the most important, most critical geopolitical issues that face our country, but also face the bank. And I guess you identified China as number one. Why?
So, first of all, welcome everybody. Thrilled to be here again. And the geopolitical situation is probably the most complicated and dangerous since World War II. If you look at the kind of the nexus of the Ukraine war, 300,000 Russian troops invaded a free democratic nation on the border of NATO, threatening nuclear blackmail. It's never happened in history. Educating the world that maybe have a nuclear weapon, you can kind of take advantage of your neighbors. It's affected all global relationships. Then you had the terrorist activity in Israel, which is now a little bit of a powder keg in the Middle East. We hope these things resolve, but a lot of wars that go on for a year or two can last for 10, and they can have somewhat unpredictable outcomes. But it's also affecting oil, gas, trade, all military relationships, and you can see it strengthening some of American military allies, and also our relationship with China. I think that relationship is very complicated. It's made more complicated. So we're kind of on different sides when it comes to Ukraine. This is a situation you got to be careful about. The world order after World War II, Bretton Woods, WTO, trade, UN, et cetera, is kind of being challenged. And if this doesn't go the right way, you can easily see a world that kind of goes more to a little bit of chaos as people realign allies, relationships, et cetera. I'm a little surprised that things haven't gone worse for oil and gas. People flying drones and satellites and blowing up Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. It doesn't take a lot to send oil and gas prices back to 120 or higher. If that happens, it's bad for the climate, all the climate folks, because everyone turns back on their coal plants, poor nations and rich nations, but it's terrible for poor countries. As you know, a lot of these countries are kind of struggling a little bit already, and so we have a dangerous situation here. And it's far more important than whether the economy does a little bit better or a little bit worse this year or next year. I don't even like talking about them in the same breath, because one is about the future of the free world, one is about something we're all used to, the weather. Things get better and things get worse in the economy, and most of us have dealt with that before.
But speaking about the danger to the free world, there's increasing concern about the axis, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea.
Yeah.
And you're dealing in that world, and you're dealing with companies that deal in that world.
Yeah.
What are you telling them?
I think, if Russia wins or in any way wins in Ukraine, you probably will have a splintering apart and maybe even a testing of NATO. And that's really dangerous. And so, we obviously have to navigate the risk. We have some risk still in Russia. We have obviously a lot of risk in China. But I think the best thing with China is that we should engage tough, open-eyed. America should remember it's in a very good position relative to China. We have all the food, water, and energy we need. We've got the most prosperous nation on the planet, 80,000 per person GDP. They actually import 11 million of barrels of oil a day. About half go to the Strait of Hormuz or through the Red Sea. So they're, past American warships, by the way. They don't have enough food or enough water. They still have 400 million people living in poverty, a GDP of $15,000, not $80,000. We still have more innovation. They're catching up, and we shouldn't be against that. They have terrible demographics. So, but my view is we should fully engage with them. Obviously, we should protect ourselves on anything around national security, like semiconductors or rare earths, et cetera. But, we should engage, and for the betterment of the world. There's no reason other than Taiwan that, we have to have adversarial relations with them. I don't normally do this in my letter. The best thing to protect the United States is to have the strongest military. And if anyone thinks that the world is a safe place, I hope you now have lost that notion. It's not, it never will be. And we kind of forget, we got lulled into a false sense of security because we had an easy couple of years or something like that. So, and then we got to grow our economy. That's the best way to handle everything, like our burgeoning deficit, and to get more income to lower income Americans, and things like that. It should grow the economy. And so I talk a lot about having growth policies.
But you talk about the military and strengthening our military, but we're now at a point with our deficit that we're spending more on debt service than we are in defense.
Yeah.
So do we have the American leadership to address these issues?
So Neil Ferguson, who's a great historian, economist, wrote about that whenever that's happened, that country lost its leadership position.
That's right.
So I'm hoping there's a difference here. Obviously America's in a different position. The other thing is very important because, you travel the world, people look at American leadership and the thing of the global South and why America, and so America, Bob Gates writes this great book called The Exercise of Power. The first chapter is called The Symphony of Power. That America's overused and misused its military muscle, but massively underused diplomacy, development finance, economic, getting American companies to do more overseas, education, information, think of intelligence, information. So there's no one else who can do it. So America shouldn't be rude. It shouldn't be our way of the highway, which we tend to do. When we did this IRA Act, it very much was in the violated trade agreements. It was very much in the in the face of allies who said, that violated trade agreement says buy America, build America, in America, of America. Well, we better be a little more polite. But most of these nations would, we have a lot of allies. And most of these nations would like America to take a leadership role if we do it respectfully and we help some of the developing world and things like that. So that has to come from America. If it doesn't come from America, it's not going to come from anywhere else. And all these other nations, they have to find other people to ally with, militarily and economically. So I do think it's a complex situation.
Would you like to be a part of the conversations at the Economic Club of New York? Learn more about membership, the New York City and National Fellows programs, and other opportunities for engagement in the club at www.econclubny.org. And
you're not worried about our polarized electorate?
I don't like the polarized electorate. I do think, and I wrote about this in my letter, there is part of a reason for it, and I call it the kind of the frame of the American dream. The lower 25% of our society has been left behind. Their income didn't go up for 20 years. And people don't realize they make $15 an hour or less for the most part. These numbers are a couple of years old. They're dying 10 years younger. They're the ones who go home to these crime-ridden neighborhoods. Their schools are not doing great. Half the kids in a lot of the inner city schools don't graduate. What have we done? Years of all these policies, we still haven't gotten there. So I have fixes for it. I think we should double the earned income tax credit. But I think we got to lift up those parts of society, and that will reduce polarization. If you travel around America and you go to rural parts or inner cities, they look at what's going on in D.C. They're not that happy with D.C. They look at that as one big thing where everyone gets what they want, but not them. And they have more of the drug problems, et cetera. And so we need to do more and better. And that's why I talk about we need to grow the economy. I mean, that's the best way to help people is to grow this economy, share the wealth a little bit, lift up some of these disadvantaged communities.
But your worst case scenario, and you mention it repeatedly, is stagflation.
Yeah.
Is in fact inflation, but without growth.
Yeah. Economically, the worst case scenario is stagflation. The worst case scenario is a fraying of the free and Western world. I mean, that to me is the sine qua non. We can't take our eye off. In fact, we should be so focused on, we should stop doing other things which could be a waste. And but the stagflation I speak about there is, this is just risk management. This is not guessing the future. You have to be prepared as a bank for 2% interest rates, 6 or 7 or 8. I have to be. I can't sit here and tell my shareholders, well, things happen you don't expect, you're bankrupt, which happened to a couple of banks. And so you got to be prepared for it. But you also have to say, why? So if rates go up to 6%, but the economy is booming, it's because there's a lot of demand for capital, inflation, in fact, has come down, that's not so bad. But stagflation has the negative effect of no growth, inflation, and obviously no growth hurts volumes and profits and consumers and jobs. And so, yes, I think there's a chance that can happen again. I think there's a huge demand for, I look at the future, so obviously inflation has come down a little bit, but if you look at the future, and again, I'm not sure models pick this, the extent of the fiscal spending. It was $6 trillion during COVID. It was $4 trillion of QE, and it was now we have a deficit of almost $2 trillion, 6% of GDP, the highest peacetime deficit ever. And then the demand for capital down the road is enormous. It's the remilitarization of the world. It's the green economy, which we think will cost $4 trillion. Unfortunately, some will be wasted. It's the restructuring of trade. We don't think it's going to go away, but the restructuring itself is inflationary. And unemployment is already very low. And the fiscal deficits. It's not just America. So ours is far worse than everybody else, but everyone did it. Just about every developed nation, everyone did QE. We've never had, if you look at the history of the world, we've never had QE before. So I'm not quite as comfortable with QT as other people. And so we'll see how it plays out. So I'm hoping for the best, but we would handle stagflation too.
Well, with QT draining, $900 billion of liquidity a year?
Yeah.
And then, of course, higher interest rates. Do you think companies are ready for higher for longer?
So when we had I call it the mini bank crisis, we knew First Republic was kind of like the last domino that had that particular set of problems, very concentrated deposits, too many securities and HTM, and basically an interest rate exposure staring them in the face. Should never have been allowed. I mean, I don't know how that type of stuff happens. And I blame the banks. I think the regulators also should blame themselves, but I blame the banks, CEOs for the most part, management teams. And so, what I said is it's over, provided rates don't go up and you don't have a recession. If rates go up, just think of the 10-year bond goes to 5 or 6%, and you have a recession, that will hurt leveraged companies, profits, jobs, wages. And obviously, if you're a bank with interest rate exposure and you haven't protected yourself, you could be hurt on that. And obviously, it'll affect real estate. And so, you can have this kind of double, triple whammy affecting some banks. So, there are circumstances which, it'll look more like the 70s and like what we've had for the last 20 years.
It's really interesting. You just mentioned that risk management isn't about guessing the future, but it's really about trying to determine how you can survive the worst possible situation. So, if you had to describe the U.S. economy, how resilient is it?
It's unbelievable, but if you look at it, it's basically booming. It's been booming for a while. Since COVID, kind of before there was slow growth. If you look at the economy before, it was very low growth for 20 years. And if I was a government, I'd be looking at that saying, why? And I think there are a lot of bad reasons for it. Like regulations and bureaucracy and stupidity and forward policies and anti-growth taxation and a whole bunch of different other types of stuff. But if you look at the economy since then, it's been booming. Unemployment hit an all-time low. It's been under 4% now for the better part of 2 or 3 years, something like that. The American consumer, even if we go into a recession, is much wealthier than before. Debt service ratios are very low. Yeah, they're normalizing now, and credit is, we say it's normalized, it's not gotten worse, but it's still the lowest it's ever been pretty much on record. Their home prices are up, their stock prices are up. Remember, 50% of people don't have they don't owe money at all. And so even if we go into recession, the consumer's in good shape. But that doesn't mean you can fight off the effects of stagflation or something like that if it gets much worse. And so I worry that it looks more like the 70s than we've seen before. If you go back to the 70s, deficits were half what they are today. The debt to GDP was 35%, not 100%. And so part of the reason I think we've had this strong growth is the fiscal spending. And why not spend another $2 trillion? And if we did, what would happen? You'll have more money, people would invest more money, people would hire more people, and you'd have more growth. But it's also quite inflationary, and so you have trade-offs there. So far we're in pretty good shape, and so far it looks like that soft landing type of scenario, but I'm putting me on the cautious side of that one.
Let's shift maybe towards, maybe something more positive. It's also risky, but technology.
Yeah.
And how much will banking be affected by technology, AI, machine learning?
A lot. I think the biggest risk that we all face is cyber, by the way, this war of cyber. But AI, first of all, the thing about technology is the thing that changes the world. So you just read any history. It's why we stopped being hunter-gatherers. People learned about agriculture, printing, disseminating knowledge. And then, of course, the steam engine, the internet, these things have made mankind far better off. We had 40 million people working on farms in 1900. Now it's 1 million. They worked 6.5 days a week, 12 hours a day. Now it's 5 days a week, and it's why, the kids of the people in this room are going to live to 100. They're not going to have cancer probably. So it is the best thing that ever happened to mankind. It gets abused. Airplanes crash. Pharmaceuticals get misused. Sometimes when we have new things, it takes a little time for it. AI will be one of those big ones. I don't know at the pace it's going to happen, but we already have 400 use cases in AI today for risk, fraud, marketing, hedging, analysis, idea generation, agents which take care of problems, errors. When we have errors, a lot of us take care of AI is both analyzing the errors and starting to take actions on them. Because, once you figure out what the problem is, it can actually fix the problem. So it's real. So we took a woman, we made her head of AI and data, and they're related, put her on the management team reporting to me and the president of the company, Daniel Pinto. That's how important it is. And every business inside has a mirror. So, credit card, consumer, trading, all has it. It is unbelievable. And it's just starting.
And you mentioned it in 2017 in a shareholder letter. You talked about AI.
We first started using it in 2012. Okay, and we started using it for some of these mortgage problems you all knew about. So, and then I wanted to build our own. So we started building. We have 2,000 people doing it. We have 100, maybe even 200 people in research today. Synthetic data, NLP. And there's going to be a million ways to use it. Big databases, small databases. Hedging equities. You can't run a large language model because there are 1,000 trades in a split second. So you got to do it much quicker than that. And it also costs money to run those things. Like I forgot the number, 4 cents or something to run. To go to Bing and you ask it to summarize a book, it costs 4 cents. And so you're not paying yet, but they're going to charge you eventually. So it's real. It's going to be used for everything. It's going to obviously affect jobs. Every job and every application can have a kind of co-pilot that helps you do your job. So it'll make you far more effective and productive. It will remove some jobs over time. But I'd like to be ahead of those things. So you understand them. You can redeploy your people into other jobs, and there will be bad parts. Okay, just like airplanes crash, we know AI is being used by bad guys already. We have extensive, cyber controls, but in cyber it'll be used in politics and misinformation, social media. It's already being used extensively to manipulate human beings, which I think should be stopped if I were the government. And so there are bad attributes, but you always have to keep in mind, bad guys can use it regardless. So you almost have to do it, and you got to. And the other thing about AI is it's not really the technology you have to understand. It's just you have to understand how you can use it.
You've been listening to The Forum by the Economic Club of New York, a nonprofit 501c3 dedicated to connecting the world's brightest minds for critical, nonpartisan conversations. Be sure to subscribe now to be alerted to future new episodes. Would you like to be a part of the conversation at the Economic Club of New York? Learn more about membership, the New York City and National Fellows programs, and other opportunities for engagement in the club at www.econclubny.org. I'm your host, Becky Quick. Thanks for listening.